I guess what I don't know may or may not be my legacy in in the net is something I brought a couple of weeks ago around sex and the libidinal and particularly shadow forms of sexual expression that can lead to uh, domineering, exploitative versions of sexuality. And something you mentioned that I think would be really interesting to explore is kind of in this age of sexual liberation, which was certainly what inspired this one sex cult that I brought up in that session that was formed in the early 2000s in San Francisco, where that movement was kind of taking off. And so, yeah, like I don't want to put words in your mouth, but kind of
Go for it.
how,
That's okay.
yeah,
I'll fix them later if needed. It's okay. Don't
great,
mind.
great. Why that manifests. Yeah, so maybe speaking to kind of the libidinal potential latent in human beings, but also without, proper checks and balances and channeled towards a beatific vision, a place, a specific person, as opposed to how
Yeah.
sex addicts can kind of just violently channel it across. So like maybe like what checks and balances need to be, or maybe that's not the right way to think about it, but like what needs to be put in place to make sure that those shadow forms of so the way I kind of see it is like there's the two poles that I think you know we kind of find ourselves in, especially in the moment of Epstein, right? Is the one side, which is like the primal, uh, like kind of really crude and cruel forms of sexuality that, you know, oftentimes is done in this spirit of goodness. It's, we're allowing ourselves to feel into our bodies. We're allowing ourselves to, just explore and express ourselves. Everything's hunky dory. And then the other side, which is, I think, what more people can probably relate to, which is the repression, right? Like
Yeah.
I was raised in a particular religious tradition that, stigmatized, sexual expressions. It's something you don't talk about. It's something you don't really engage in, but for, I don't know, procreation. So it kind of is reduced to this.
But also don't talk
Um,
about it then, just do it.
right, right, right. Yeah, 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 exactly. I remember, I read when I was like 19, uh, still a virgin. I read Marcus Aurelius, and he talked about sex as like, because the Stoics were big into non-attachment, and so he like broke sex down in this like very reductive way. Like, he was talking about like, oh yeah, it's just like this insertion, and you do it a couple times, and it's over. And
Mechanical. It's a mechanical
I was
process.
like, that, yeah, exactly. It's a mechanical process.
Mm.
Um, and I mean, maybe there's something to that, to, so that you don't get so enraptured in the passion of it and you lose that.
Yeah,
But
don't
that's
enjoy
also,
yourself. No, don't enjoy yourself.
yeah, no, it's yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
and
yeah,
so then I think there's like this compartmentalization thing where it's like,
yeah.
um, something I heard a long time ago that I really believe in is the way you do one thing is representative of the way you do all things.
Hmm.
And so if you think of sex in a particular way, it's
Hmm.
it's probably a pretty good proxy of how you think of a lot of things.
Yep.
Um, and so anyways, that's a lot. So
That's
I'll
great.
I'll kind of stop there and
There's so much here. I just think, I mean, we really just need like an ongoing series to talk about sex. Um, I think that as you were talking, what comes to mind for me too is what do we even mean with the word sex? The definition of it seems to vary wildly, um, depending on who we're talking to, and in what context. There's the I guess there's a few different themes that run into it. So there is libidinal energy. I think there is just a lack of understanding about that in general. and I think it causes a lot of confusion, um, which can lead into things like sex cults, and not just like a sex cult, but more of this approach to sexual behavior, if we call it that, that is sort of like just wildly unfettered how sort of spread around. Like there's not really any firm focus on a person or
Mm-hmm.
a right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then there is also intimacy, and all of these things are obviously very nuanced, and intimacy can mean all sorts of things. But I think part of what can happen when we go down the path of I should open up to all the libidinal energy, and I should just let myself take part in like whatever sexual acts I want with whomever I want, so long as it's consenting and we're all adults and all this stuff, and just open it up even more, right? Just explore that way, and just let the kind of sexual urges lead. When we go down that pathway, we I don't know that we are thinking about the possible ramifications for intimacy, for what intimacy means to us, and
Mm-hmm.
how doing all of that has consequences for our ability to choose to be intimate to varying different levels with different people in our life, to understand intimacy more deeply. But then there's also the internal intimacy. There's sort of how we understand ourselves that's wrapped up in all of this as well. Um, so my mind spins out lots of directions there. When we, I think there is some fundamental confusion about. There's obviously the act of a version of sex that is about procreation, right? And so you can, if you want, be a bit like Marcus Aurelius and just, try for whatever reason, try to just look at it as a mechanical process, and strip out any need for feelings that are associated with it. But I don't think that's a way to live life. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there's a physical kind of act that we could sort of associate with a kind of sex. There are also just sexual feelings and impulses that we all have.
Yeah.
Right. So if we go
Yeah.
back to just like core feelings, core emotions is like anger and grief and guilt, and sort of positive feelings, loving feelings, joy, and sexual feelings. These are sort of, and sadness, these are like the big ones. And then there are things like anxiety and fear, which the way I work is slightly different, but sexual feelings, I think as a category of feelings, we just don't talk about enough. I don't think it's talked about enough in the therapy room often,
Mm-hmm.
depending on the kinds of therapy, but also in life.
Yeah.
We all have sexual feelings all the time. They're like all the other feelings in that we don't choose when they arise. So like you could be with someone talking to them and you might just have a sexual feeling happen in your body. Like it's not, I think demystifying some of that is important. It's not, it doesn't mean anything, but it's like any of the other feelings. Then you get to decide, um, is that relevant to what's going on right now? Is it something I actually want to act on? Is it important? Like it's like any of the
Yeah.
feelings. I
Yeah.
think there's this idea with this more like sexual freedom side of things that if you have those feelings, you should be acting on them most of the time. Like if you have sexual feelings when you're with someone and they're also a consenting adult, like it's a good idea for some reason to explore those together. I'm just curious as to what people think they are achieving by doing that. Like to
Mm-hmm.
me, it starts to become a little bit like a rule for a rule's sake. I don't know, like it's I'm
Yeah.
just I don't really know what they
Like it
think.
becomes
Yeah,
not pathologized, but it becomes like a dogma almost. Like
yeah,
there's no discernment in it. It's
yeah,
like, yeah, it kind of becomes the very thing it swears to destroy, which is like strict rules. Like it becomes its
yeah.
own rule and you become a slave to it.
Yeah, and I think, like it varies obviously depending on the example we're talking about. But I know, for example, that for some people they see it as this is like a kind of sexual liberation that's going to help me to break free of I don't know, jealousy, or possessiveness of a partner. If I can come to work through I don't know, somehow by having sex with lots of people, I'm going to come to be able to work through the idea that we can all, and maybe my partner as well, we can all have sex with lots of people. However, we still have the special bond. And I think people think it's going to help them work through all these layers of things. But in my mind, it's kind of making like a fatal error. There's no,
Mm. Mhm.
part of what goes on when we have sort of sexual feelings, sexual impulses, urges, is it's in my mind it's the libidinal energy, right? And this is a really important pot of energy that we, I think, need. It's to our benefit. It is useful to us to be able to convert, if we call that, or sublimate some of that into other areas of our life. It is that same
Yes.
kind of feeling inside that makes us alive and excited to have a conversation like this, right?
Hmm. Yes.
When you suddenly inspiration strikes and you want to sit down and write that thing that you've been thinking about for ages, and you're just writing and you're just in it, and it feels exciting and pleasurable, right? That is libidinal energy. Um,
Hmm.
and so I just think about it as this pot of energy. This is just weird imagery, but it's like this pot of energy that, yes, some of it can be used for your actual sexual endeavors in life. That's fine. But it's not kind of all for that. Like it's almost like
Hmm.
if you drain all of that, then I don't know, I see it as an enlivening force that can give, that is supposed to help us to be creative, right? This like broader sense of
Yeah.
creativity, not just sexual, but like creative. Um, it helps us to feel, yeah, alive. I think it has a really important link to, Daniel Garner, for anyone listening, talks a lot about, negentropy and this kind of like being in
Hmm.
an experience where you actually feel like it's energy giving. I
Hmm.
think it's related to all of that. Um, in my mind, it's almost part of the kind of the maturity, the evolution, if you will, is that we start to harness and use that energy for these other matters as well, that can feel just as pleasurable. This is the thing. But oftentimes, I wonder about almost like a squandering of energy, if we think about it like that, to just be kind of out, just like sleeping with whoever you want. Um, it's that's fine if you feel good, like you feel good in the moment, but there's sort of like this, and if you're having sex with someone, um and you're feeling good and all of this, but also you do it knowing that that relationship, potentially in this example, is going absolutely nowhere. You may never even see this person again or whatever. So you're not
Yeah.
even building something relationally,
Yes.
right? It's
Yeah.
not even
Yeah.
contributing to that. It's not contributing to really any kind of intimacy outside of, um, you know, I got to orgasm, you got to orgasm, we had a good moment. Um, and then you sort of, it just, I don't know, there's other ways that you can funnel libidinal energy in my mind that lead to a building of something and a creating of different kinds of things that have greater purpose and value out in the world, not just for yourself, but relationally, communally. That's not to say there's not a, I'm not trying to be, it's not to say there's not a role for just you want to feel good in a moment, feel good. But this is again about like balance. And if you can, this is why I think that if you can use sexual energy in reality, if you can actually engage in sexual behaviors with someone whom you're also trying to build other kinds of intimacy with,
Mm.
I think that's
Hmm.
where it's most powerful.
Hmm.
That's how it makes
Hmm.
sense to me. I don't really understand why the foregrounding of the idea that we completely disconnect those things. To me, that really does become quite and I'm going to use this just in a general sense, quite a narcissistic endeavor. Like it really is just, I got to feel really good. And then I got to do it again and again and again. And it's in a very primal way. And it's all very exciting. And I think we can often wrap stories around it that, oh, we're sort of, not letting anyone limit what we can and can't do and put boundaries on us and control us. And I'm free. And it's all of that. But I think that's a story we add on top afterwards. I think it's really just allowing very primal circuitry to be able to be in control of our actions, um, and making and not understanding the consequences of what that means about um, what is an intimate relationship for us then? Like what and also
Yeah.
just the draining of that kind of energy pot and the energy supply. It's a bit like, it is. It's like addiction. It's like people that just masturbate nonstop. It's all this release of energy um, that in my mind has great creative potential. And you enjoy it, you still have a lot of pleasure while you're doing it, but you can do it in other relational ways and other creative ways. So I've gone round and round in circles there.
Yeah, so much. I'm glad you mentioned the kind of sublimation of the sexual energy into other creative pursuits. That was something that I was definitely going to bring in, and
Yeah.
it made me think of. I mean, it's kind of an obvious parallel once you think of it, because what is the sexual energy ultimately in service of?
Yeah.
This creation of new life, right? And so I think an expansion of that idea of what creation of life can mean in terms of that energy, um,
Yes.
because it seems like it's we don't really understand. I mean, we might understand what it feels like to have a sexual feeling and to be like, oh, that is a sexual feeling. But I think we don't understand the myriad of ways that that can be used for.
Yes,
Like
that's right.
when we feel it, it doesn't just mean we need to
Time to
release
exit.
it sexually. Yeah, exactly. Like it can mean like it could actually be like an important signal of like there's something that is moving through us, and whether that be in writing, in conversation, in some artistic pursuit, in exercise, in all these myriad of ways of
Building something like actually physically,
yes,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Like like building a
Oh,
project of some kind. Um, and those are
yeah.
oftentimes far less sexy than, right? They're longer builds. They require a lot of times deep thinking and thought. Um, like relationality with other people, instead of kind of this,
Who might not be
yeah, this
feeling the
kind of
same way as you, right? Like that's important too, right?
right.
So like often it's like, oh,
Yes.
I'm feeling so alive, and I go to talk to this person and they're just like dead, and so it's frustrating. Whereas like, yeah, if you can just go have sex, that's faster and easier, and everyone's into it and it's done. Yeah.
Right. And also, what you were talking about with a lot of people who, yeah, are just kind of having sex all over the place. They're doing it with people, they're having one night stands, they're doing it with people that they don't have relationships with, or it's like a strictly physical
Yeah.
relationship, not one that you're building emotional intimacy. So, if you are with your long-term partner, long-term monogamous partner, and you have this desire for sex and they don't,
Yeah.
then you have to meet that
Yep.
lack, right? Like
Yep.
you have to know how to hold that
Yes.
and to not
Yeah.
get defensive and feel like, oh, they're withdrawing, or maybe they are, but like
They're rejecting
it's
me. Like,
all
yeah.
yes, it's all like relational exploration that is
Yeah.
much more difficult and harder. It's a lot simpler just to find someone on a dating app to hook up with who's, just they want the same thing,
That's
no
right.
strings attached, it's over. It's a lot more messy to um in the moment find this emotional and sexual and psychological resonance, right, with someone. And
Absolutely.
you're never going to be fully on the same page, but it's like you have to read, you're learning how to read your partner and how to read yourself in relationship. And so,
Yes.
like, you're not, neither of us are saying like don't have sex if you if you feel
No.
that feeling, but it's um yeah, like I was thinking of Ian McGilchrist, Master and His Emissary. Like it's almost like the sexual act itself is an emissary that's serving
Yeah.
the higher what you're building together, right? As partners.
Yes.
So yeah.
A- And I love what you said there because that is the nature of any kind of committed relationship, is that it necessarily builds complexity. Like you have to, in order to be able to confront not just who you are and your needs and wants and how that's changing and shifting over a time scale, but also how that meets what's happening with your partner or your friend, like even if we're talking outside of romantic relationships. But it builds you are always building your own inner complexity and understanding and having to work on it continuously with the other person, and that can sound like a slog, that can sound awful. Like people that are listening that aren't, haven't had a relationship like that might be like, I don't want to do that. I just want to have sex, but the truth of it, and I've seen this time and time again because I'm privy to so many people's lives in the work that I do. It's a real privilege because I get to see it over and over. Um, that it's actually those relationships where people really meet and confront the complexity of one another in the deepest possible way. They don't run away from it. Um, they are actually the ones that can end up having like the best sex, if we just put it down in those
Mm,
terms. Because it
yeah.
actually increases intimacy. Like you said, it's kind of a stacking, right? Then you can be having sex with someone who you have like deep intimacy with on all these different levels, psychologically and emotionally and physically and just all of it. And that actually enhances the experience. Um, but it's very different to the sell of just a very quick, fast thing that you pretty much know how it's going to be for you, like hopefully how you're going to feel. And it's easier in the moment. And I think a lot of this comes back down to just, modern life and just all the pressures that we're under all the time and not having enough time and patience to be able to develop these things and having very quick, easy solutions available to us. Um, but I agree with you that I've always thought about libidinal energy as it's creative. And just like you say, I get that from the fact that, the purpose of the sexual act is to create the new life, create the baby. So it's the same thing. It's a wider understanding of that word. It is that feeling that I'm sure all of us know that you get when you're just really alive to something, and it can happen very quickly. You can just have a really drab morning where you feel tired and you didn't sleep properly, and then you can have like a conversation like this where immediately it's like a lot, you're alive. It's all the same energy, but we're just using it in a particular way. And I think having, like you said, none of this is about saying don't have sex, and like do it to whatever degree you want to that feels right for you. It's like any of these things. Are you informed? Are you just kind of like reflecting on what you're doing, why you're doing it, having some understanding of what that might mean about other areas in your life, and then do what works for you. But I think most people aren't really thinking about it in those terms. Um,
Hmm.
and it's having a lot of consequences on people's ability to be able to find intimate relationships, is what I'm seeing. People are craving intimacy, and they're like, but I'm out there and like I'm free and like we're having lots of sex and I'm meeting people and I'm not being too attached and I'm doing all these things. But they're all things that sound like the opposite of finding intimacy. And they're like, but I can't find an intimate relationship. Or they start to experience that sense of loneliness and they don't understand why. They sort of, buttressed themselves against the idea that they really need much in a romantic relationship outside of, um, I want lots of freedom and autonomy. I don't want to be told what to do. I want to be able to sleep with whoever I want, and my partner does too, so it's okay. Like, um, lots of this going on, and then they get to a point where they wonder why they are feeling so sort of hollow and lonely inside. Um, and yeah, so there's that component as well. Yeah, do you want to
Yeah.
anywhere? Because
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah. Well, I was thinking as you were talking, um like a curiosity came up around how how you observe people moving from um, you know, uh problematic relationships with sexuality, say, on either end, on either end of that spectrum, to one that's more integrated. And I
Yeah.
was just thinking, as you were talking about um, developing emotional intimacy as being kind of this precursor to a healthy, sex life, how a lot of like I think more and more men now growing up are kind of aware of a lot of the common complaints that women have about men, right, in the dating world. And they're kind of, I can see, there's a sea change. There's like a course correct of like getting in touch with your feelings,
Oh yeah, right.
being a better listener, like being asking questions, like all of these things.
Is this in service
And
of having sex, or is this in service of development?
well, you're right. Yeah, I mean, there's the like, what's the real motive here?
Yeah,
But then I also see a lot of women then coming back and being like, well, now I kind of feel like all the guys are just kind of like nice guys.
that's right.
And that's also like a turnoff,
Yep,
right? Um,
yep.
I said recently that I'm a recovering nice guy. And I got a couple laughs from the men's circle that I'm in. But it's been my experience. Like I've always been the, empathetic, sensitive guy. And that's gotten me a lot of friends that are women. Didn't get
Yeah,
me a lot of dates
that's
until
right.
fairly
Yeah,
recently.
yeah, yeah.
And so like I had to confront, and I think I went down some, I think I had some like disordered thinking about it for a while around what that was and how to integrate that and whatever. But I think before I started the relationship that I'm now in, that she listens to these, so
And I've
I'd
enjoyed us
like to hope
recording these
I'd like to hope
conversations.
I'd like
I
to hope
know.
our what I'm about to say is true for her as well. But um,
It's a moment in
like
time.
yeah, I think I got to a place where I was seeing these sexual feelings as like creative potentials. And like in the months kind of leading up to the start of the relationship, I was writing a lot more poetry than I had ever had. And not only was I writing poetry, but I was like performing it, you know, at
That's
open mics,
that's the
performing,
libidinal energy. Yeah.
yes, yeah, like performing it with others. Like I was really starting to like, if I had inspiration, if I had a thought, instead of ignoring it like I would always do, I would try
Yeah.
and write it. I would
You
actually
would
like
honor
try and
it. It's
act
an
on it.
honoring. Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry,
And
can I jump in
and
just
I,
so I can get this
yes,
timeline
please.
right? Was
Please.
this was happening right before you met her, or this was happening at the start of the relationship with her, or
It was I would say like the 6 months prior to meeting her was when I was really like
yeah,
committing myself.
got it.
And um
Wow.
I was also, yeah, like I was also just kind of taking control of my life in a lot of new areas in ways that I hadn't before. And just like,
Wow.
anyways, I say all that to say, like, I think there's,
You're taking action, right? Like you're taking action. It's quite a masculine kind of like, yeah,
yes,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yes, and action towards what I feel is, a a higher place, a
Yes.
place of connection, relationality, not this kind of hedonic
Yes.
thing.
More complexity.
And yeah, and I say all that to say, like, I think there's something I've noticed it as, kind of the mindfulness revolution is taking off. And um, you know, there's I think this integration of the feminine in with the masculine is kind of a general trend, that there is the potential for a new generation of spiritual men with no backbone to
Yeah.
kind of be the, and I certainly in my younger years, like finding Buddhism, Eastern philosophy, like was very, and still am, like very
Mm.
entranced by the, sitting under the Bodhi tree, watching the waves pass, listening to the birds, like that kind of stillness, right? And there's so much beauty in that, and that is so essential to, I think, the good life. But
Yeah.
there's a certain passivity
Yes.
that can come with that I think, especially as men, if
It's
not
neutering.
integrated with that right.
It's
Yeah, it's
neutering.
neutering.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if it's not integrated with that creative
Yeah.
aliveness, taking life by the reins,
Yeah.
um, oriented towards the divine,
Yes.
then it,
Yes.
yeah, it's limp.
It's limp. It is. And
Yeah,
all these words make perfect sense for it. It's yeah. And that's what people experience. Like if we're gonna make it gendered, we'll just keep it that way for
yeah.
simplicity's sake, right? But
So,
like that's
sorry,
what a woman no,
yeah.
I was just gonna say
Sorry,
that.
sorry to jump in. I just wanted to ask a quick question. Like, how do you, because I'm very interested, in my own practice one day, like working with men. And so kind of what have you observed in the kind of movement from the kind of nice guy syndrome to this healthier integrate? Because it's scary. I will say, like, and I'm sure it's scary from the other side too, the kind of tough guy down to the, that as
Mhm.
well. But it's scary to like step into, it's like you're stepping into power. And I think that's why there's so much sexual repression, because
Yeah.
power can be scary, can be,
Yeah.
destructive. So yeah, like
It
what
can.
would you say to that?
Yes. Okay, so if we look at it from the direction, I guess, of the kind of the nice, the overly nice guy, the guy lacking the backbone that kind of comes in. Sorry, I laugh every time. This is taking me back to when we were laughing at the net. Every time there's like a word that's like sexual innuendo, I just think we should have like a little ding ding on the
Yeah.
screen.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
uh, so
Innuendo tracker.
that's right. The screen's
Yeah.
become full. Um, That's okay. So I think everything you were saying there was just spot on in terms of how I've been sort of witnessing it and experiencing it. There's a kind of stillness and sort of meditativeness and being nice, if we call it that, which is I think is actually started to operate more as a neutering, right? So it's not stillness for the sake of just having a moment of calm. It's actually an attempt to override and press out any other feelings. And I think the important thing here is that when we are talking about sexual feelings, we are often talking about for many people, probably, yeah, I don't want to put numbers, but many people, we are talking about sexual feelings that have not sufficiently differentiated, oftentimes from aggressive feelings as well. And so there can kind of be this fusion. Um, I think for a lot of men, just real generalities, a lot of men that maybe sit more on that in that group that you were describing, um, I think that they have underneath it all, just a confusion and a fear around their aggressive drives, and that if they get too in touch with sexual feelings, that actually at the same time gets in touch with aggressive drives, and they have been taught explicitly, but also a lot implicitly, that the worst possible thing in the world, obviously, as a man, is to be aggressive towards a woman, or children, So there is this real gendered component to it that they get taught implicitly that they are a threat to women and that women find them scary, and they need to be on the lookout for their own impulses and behaviors and desires, and um, there's this there's already this flattening inside, I think, around some of these key drives. They never got taught how to have them in a healthy way. They therefore never got to play around with them and experience them in safe containers of different relationships. Um, you even just think about my son's at school at the moment, so I think about this a lot. just sort of um, the way that aggression gets managed by teachers and things if you're a boy versus a
Hmm.
girl. And I know there's good
Hmm.
reasons for that. I'm not trying to, but it's complex.
Yeah.
And we're also teaching them anyway. So this kind of monsterization, if we put it in shorthand, I think that a lot of boys that then become men um, grow up with about themselves, about their own drives, their own power. This includes their physical dominance, their sexual dominance, um, any kind of, yeah, aggressive drive. Sexual drives are all bound up in that, obviously, you can hear. And so there is a lot of restraint and there's a lot of repression that is happening on multiple levels for these men. And like I said, that doesn't necessarily mean that you came from a family where those things were being said to you and done to you in obvious ways. This can be very low grade. And it can sometimes just take one or two big instances of something happening where you come to monsterize that part of yourself. And then if you combine that with, for some of these men, um, the fact that they might also just be really sensitive and intuitive anyway, and then they can actually lean on that part of themselves more as a way to also veer away from having to deal with that whole ball of confusion and anxiety and fear, um, then they start to then they start to not well they start to interact in relationships in ways where they get more praise, they get more warmth, they get connection. They can oftentimes get told, you're not like those other guys, you're not like the ones that want to hurt me, if we put it in shorthand. There's a reinforcement of this kind of
Hmm.
gentleness. um,
Hmm.
I'm going to say some more generalities. These are all generalities. I don't want anyone to, but there's also, I think, oftentimes a problem here with the mother potentially.
Hmm.
What's our problem? I mean, I'm a mother. I have problems too. I'm not trying to exclude myself, right? But like we're talking about, oftentimes this might also be in combination with having a mother where um, the gentleness, the sensitivity, all those parts of the son are really kind of garnered or are appreciated or are needed maybe because there's a hole in the marital relationship. And so the kind of, oh, you're sensitive and like that becomes really reinforcing. And then that's another way for boys to cut off all those other drives they have inside them because they don't want to notice aggressive impulses towards their mother. No one wants to notice sexual impulses towards their mother, like all these things. So they kind of get made even more taboo and put down there. And there's this real sort of reinforcement of women, like I get to get close to women and I get to feel like I'm a good man when I'm like this, right? And all this is happening on various levels. And then I think what happens is that even when men get to a point in their lives where more consciously they're aware that they don't want to just be doing that anymore. So this has been so kind of pushed down and that it's quite difficult to be able to get back in touch with, to understand how to even get in touch with their aggressive drives in a way that's helpful to them. I often see a lot of men who are depressed and they're depressed on the back of just, yeah, like a lifetime of being the nice guy. And then there's just this kind of depression that cements everything down on top. Um, or you see the kind of nice guy that gets to some particular event in their life, or maybe a parent dies, or this a marriage starts to break down or something, and all of a sudden the aggression is just so intense. Yeah, yeah. Like they just can't deny it anymore. And it freaks them out. Of course it does. Like it freaks them out. And it's frightening. And it is genuinely frightening to them. I don't think I've ever had a man come in and be like, oh, I'm finally feeling my aggression towards these people and it's fine. It's licensed. Like the truth is that I think, again, often men get demonized for that because I think there is this belief that they feel entitled to it. Like, there's so much terror and there is so much conflict that is actually going on for a man inside about his own aggressive impulse, about his sexual impulses, about all of it, just like there is with women. And I think this idea that there isn't is, yeah. Jump
Yeah.
in at any time, by the way, if I'm
Awesome.
going.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. No, yeah, just to say quickly, I would double click on all of that. I think the social credit for um and particularly in families where it's like the equilibrium of the family is very fragile, and like uh or it's kind of there's one person, usually the father, who kind of has the monopoly on the feelings of anger and rage. Like only he's allowed to feel that, no one else is. And if anyone expresses anger or rage, then it's a threat to his authority. It can lead to the destruction of the family. So then, boys and girls in that situation learn to be the mediator, right? Like the peacemaker. Um,
Yes, but I think for
but
boys
yeah.
especially, sorry, but yeah, but for boys
Hmm.
especially in that scenario too, that this kind of that's an extra pressure that really dampens down another desire there to actually to sorry, internet, to to respond to the father, like to actually step in and be protective. Like it's a real jam for a boy. Anyway, continue.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Well, and that makes me think that a lot of a lot of boys in that situation, whether consciously or unconsciously, yeah, exactly as you said, adopt this protector role. Like I'm gonna make sure that
Yeah,
my parents, my siblings, no one else feels bad. I'm gonna make sure that, all conflict is smoothed over.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I'm not gonna let it leak out to my friends that anything's happening at home. And it's like this pseudo protector role,
Yes,
right? And it seems like it comes from the same instinct as the healthy masculine instinct towards
yeah,
protecting,
yeah.
right? But um what is it protecting from, and who is it ultimately protecting? Like it's protecting the family from negative feelings, and it's protecting family members that can't tolerate that. So it's like it's a very fragile level of protectiveness, and ultimately eventually that family system is going to break. It's
Yeah.
going to bend. It's going to bend, not break, until it shatters. And then no one's going to know how to deal with it in the face of that, because no one's learned how to deal with
Yeah. And then
being Humpty Dumpty and trying to put Humpty Dumpty back
and then and
together.
then yeah, and then that child, I mean, and everyone else, but that child then has also got a whole physiology now associated with terror and anxiety and fragmentation, like whenever these things then happen in the adult relationships in his or her life. So um, what you're describing is right. I think part of the issue in that example is that even though the child steps into, like you say, the protective role, right, they're going to become protector of the family. They can't do it in the way that a genuine aggressive impulse might want to do, right, which is actually sort of fight for dominance. They are going to sort of be the emotional container. They're going to, try and keep everything calm and step in quickly and minimize any conflicts that might start, and maybe be the go-between the parents, all these things. That is a strategy that is well beyond a child's years. That is a
Yes.
kind of thing that we might
Yes.
decide to do when we are healthy, mature adults who have integrated, and we make an, like I say, informed decision to do that in a particular relationship, and we know what we're signing up for, and we have the ego strength inside to do that, knowing it's not going to fragment us. This for the child, the problem is that they're not really making a choice. They're kind of just jammed into a position where that's all that's available to
Hmm.
them. And their psyche
Hmm.
kind of just moves them in that direction, which is adaptive. It keeps them alive, it keeps things as functional as possible. Um, and, is a remarkable thing in lots of ways. Thank goodness we have that ability. But it's a kind of, when we use the word abuse, it's a kind of abuse, I guess, because that is well beyond the years of what a child can tolerate, um, understand meaningfully about what they're doing, the consequences that's going to have on them. There's no other choice available to them. The real failure there is that no one else steps in who is an adult, no one else steps in to do the protecting. So the child is assuming the protective role. However they do that, um, they're not developed enough for it yet. Like their psyche,
Mm.
their ego is not developed enough for it yet. And what this does is it creates, it now starts to create all these knots and problems and repressions and, um, even possibly fragmentation in the psyche. That this child in this particular moment in their life is forming in a way that's going to carry them into the rest of their life. They're going to carry whatever happens here into the rest of their life. Um, and so it's a really unfair task for a child. And it leads to, oftentimes it gets reinforced too, like all the time I hear this about, parents who tell their children, I'm so lucky you were so, empathetic, and I was so lucky I
Yes.
could talk to you about what was going on, and you were such a good listener. And when I talked to you about what was going on with dad, and, you know, it's not,
It's not their job.
not that, and people are well intentioned, but like that is
Mhm.
damaging them, right? Like that is well beyond they cannot meaningfully understand what on earth you're talking about when you're talking about your partner who you have, a long-term adult relationship with, you have sex with, like they don't know what they don't know what that kind of relationship is, let alone you trying to talk to them about it in depth, seeking either them to give you advice or to just hold it all for you. And the way you were describing it before, I thought was quite lovely, because as you were talking about this child who's like holding the whole family together, and is also making sure no one on the outside knows what's going on, like protecting the reputation. And I just thought of them, they're trying to be the contained ego, like they're
Mm.
trying to be,
Hmm.
it's they are trying to hold, they're trying to do all the things that the kind of mature ego, in a Freudian sense, I don't mean like in the way we use ego now, is trying to do, which is to just hold, right? Sort of integrate and metabolize and experience the complexity within, and not having to act out, not having to, they're trying to do this whole thing for their family. And
Hmm.
in a way, the image that comes
And
to,
the irony,
yeah,
like the irony is, but they still aren't the gravitational center of the family in the
no,
sense that they're not the ones that are making choices to move the family in a certain direction.
that's
They're
right.
purely reactionary.
That's right.
They still don't have any
They
agency,
have no
but
agency.
they believe that they do
Yeah.
because they're playing a role.
Mm.
They're
But
you
that
know
belief that
yeah.
they do is part of what's adaptive, I think. That belief is
Hmm.
this mistake that we have, and this is going to get us into emotional intelligence and emotional maturity.
Great.
It's that mistake that we all make all the time around, the story we wrap around why we are doing what we're doing, and it's actually really important at certain points to have a really solid story that helps us feel good about ourselves, helps us feel like we do have agency, there is meaning here. There are reasons to continue to do this. Like we all desperately want that. It's also linked to the libidinal, because if we can wrap a story around why we're doing something the way we are, especially if it's something that's mundane, or like something that feels like kind of it's not so exciting. If we can wrap a story around it to the point that we feel we have understanding, then that's the same, that's part of the libidinal drive. It's pleasurable to feel that we understand something, right? It puts us back in that kind of spot. So we it's got this extra layer of feeling kind of good about this decision we've made, but it draws on that same libidinal pot, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Um, we want to feel that we are predictable, that we can understand everything we're doing, because then we feel more in control, and we feel, and so this is very different, obviously, for the child, and I don't want to confuse the two things. But in a way, there is a grace to the fact, I think, that a child who is stuck in that position, who, as you say, actually has no agency, and when their parents have another argument of that kind, and their sibling is like crying and like, I don't know, trying to run out the door and leave the house, and they just snap into, this child snaps into their protective role and does all the things now to fix all that and contain it. It's a grace, I think, that they can, in their mind, afterwards or in the moment, think it's really important I'm here. Like this is, I get to do this for my family, and I get to show them I love them by doing this. And they have to have that, because otherwise they are experiencing complete lack of agency and a complete lack of self-worth or meaning or value,
Hmm.
or purpose, part of it too is, belief that things could be different, like belief that life is not always going to be like this. Like, if this is a great role that I can play like this, then it also helps me to believe that I can find other roles I can play. Like it's a bit of a trick. Otherwise, if a child was truly, I think, aware of what was going on, they might just feel like a slave to whatever environment they're in, and that they have zero say over their feelings, themselves, their actions. Doesn't matter how much they give to others, there's always the potential that they're going to do something next that's going to break it all apart again. It would just be a hopeless, helpless, despairing position. Um,
Mhm.
and I think, yeah, so there's a grace to it, but it's
Mhm.
so often this move that we make about I know why I'm doing what I'm doing is happening on the other side of the real motivations, if that makes sense, for
Mhm.
various
Mhm.
reasons. Um,
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's a great segue into emotional intelligence versus emotional maturity.
yeah.
I think that's a great segue into emotional intelligence versus emotional maturity.
Yeah.
Um, because yeah, I mean, I haven't looked at like the scholarship and how people would define
No.
those two terms, but
Let's just figure it out
in my
together.
mind,
It's more fun.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and yeah, people can
This is just
write me in the
our
comments.
way of
People
thinking
can write me
about
in the yeah.
it. Yeah.
um, yeah, like emotional intelligence for me is the ability to identify, um, well, first identify and label emotions. So to say I'm feeling X and someone else is feeling X. Sometimes, you know, people are so in tune that they're able to discern that without even any words. You know, you can see a body movement or the way someone's tensing their body or the tone of their voice,
Hmm.
and be able to determine that. Um, and I think even in that definition, like being able to sense and attune to your environment and kind of know like adaptability also seems like part of
Mm.
emotional intelligence, like to be able to have like awareness outside of oneself. And the kind of like the highly sensitive person archetype, like that seems to be part of it. And for a lot of children who grow up in traumatized homes, they have to be that
Yeah.
because mom and dad are unstable and fighting, and so there has to be someone who, you know, can give dad a back rub when he comes home and he's stressed, or
Yeah.
to, to notice when mom's like hasn't had a good day, and so I got to be on my best behavior so that she doesn't, lash
Don't
out at
ask
me
her
type
too
stuff.
much. Don't, yeah. Yeah.
Right, right, right. Um, and that can be a very successful adaptive strategy for a long time because it gives someone the feeling of having purpose, because my purpose is to take care, right? My purpose is to serve. My purpose is to be nice.
And also, this is
Um,
how I can channel love, because this is the other thing. Like,
yes,
we've got loving
yes.
feelings, and we want to put them somewhere. So this is how I can do that too. Yeah.
Yeah. And then in response, like you said, there is that social reward of
Yeah.
you're so empathetic, you're so thoughtful,
Hmm.
and often people will throw around the word you're wise beyond your years.
Oh
You're,
yeah.
you're very mature. Um,
Yeah.
but then there comes a point where
Mm.
I'm feeling all this rage
Yeah.
because I'm doing all these things for my parents, and they're still acting like children. I'm doing all these things for other people and attending to their emotions, but not really getting anything in return.
Yeah.
And then you wake up one day and you're like, whose life am I living?
Yeah.
Like, where am I in all of this? Where is all of this going? And
And why
and
is
that's
anyone
the
paying that much attention to me?
right,
What
right.
I'm
Yeah, and
feeling.
like why do I care so much about channeling love to places that it's not being reciprocated? Like,
Yeah.
what is the fear underneath that of losing that? And then
Yeah.
that's I think confronting that, I think, is the
Yes.
often the bridge from emotional intelligence to
Yes.
emotional maturity. And so, yeah, I'd be curious if you know,
Sure.
like what's coming up, and if you could speak to that, because
Yeah. I think it's
it's like I'm in that, and I'm observing people in, you know, kind of my peer group, like mid to late 20s, like you go to therapy and it seems like you can get very good at being emotionally intelligent. Like, like you have all
my
these new
feelings wheel. I can name them
yeah,
all.
you have all your nice new words and your psychoeducation and everything. And I'm not poo-pooing that at all.
No, no,
Like that
neither.
is
No, 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 no.
that is very that's very helpful and very necessary. Um, but it's almost like you can use just as in IQ or what the type of intelligence the school system trains, like you can act out emotional intelligence
Mhm.
without actually
Yeah.
embodying emotional maturity.
Yes.
Um,
Well,
so anyways, yeah,
well,
I'll
that's I think a prime distinction right there. So, yeah. So when you suggested this distinction to me, I got very excited because it's kind of what I've been. I feel like I've been trying to explain this for years, and that's kind of you're right. Like those, I think those two different terms are a nice way to kind of talk about it. So in my mind, so there's a few things. In my mind, emotional intelligence. If I'm just going to throw out some ideas of how I see the difference. I agree with what you said. The way that you were framing it seems to also have a lot of focus on, someone who has learnt to be watching outside a lot, like to be watching others and predict others. I need to get very good at being able to predict what other people are likely to do here. So, right, so that I can kind of manage things as needed, right? And that fits with sort of the child that we were talking about in that example before in the family system. I think also though emotional intelligence, um, it can either develop from that place, so you can, or you can just get good at this part too. Emotional intelligence is kind of like someone who is very good at being able to talk about um,
Mhm.
likely emotions a person might be having, and then the kinds of behaviors that might lead them to do, right? Like, so they might be able to observe, oh, I noticed like within my friend group, so and so was doing this behavior, and that's probably because they were feeling this, and it's kind of got a mapping function to it. It's a very, you know, there's a deeper, I don't know about deeper. There's a greater level of understanding about how emotions might work. Um, Being able to predict what people are feeling, how they might act as a result. Um,
Like the psychoanalytic mode of
yeah,
like
yeah.
maybe not psychoanalysis in in the
Okay.
like therapeutic modality, but like the
Analysis
analysis of
of,
the
yeah.
psyche.
I agree.
Yeah.
It's actually an intellectual endeavor, which is why I think emotional
Hmm.
intelligence is good. So it's the intellectual kind of reflection on prediction of um, understanding sort of level of yeah, emotions, how they work, how they're likely to influence people's behavior, and then you can apply it to yourself as well, right? It's also like, well, actually, when I reflect on that yesterday, when you did that, that was very hurtful, and so I will have been very angry about it. And but you can do it all like this, it can be very measured. It has a sense of again control and mastery associated with it. Um, there is a sort of an adaptive component or a flexibility component to it, which is what I think you were pointing to. In that I think emotional intelligence is also associated with a greater capacity to be flexible. Like it's not just, when I say you can measure and predict, it's not just one track. You're able to sort of go, oh, but then they did that facial movement, maybe this. So there is like a flow and a movement. Um, but that's intelligence, and that is sort of operating at the level of like thinking, a bit more rational, intellectual. I'm in my head. I'm calculating. I'm thinking about it, putting words to it, predicting all these things. And we know that any of those tasks can be used, I'm going to call it a tactical defense. They can be used defensively. So we can get really
Hmm.
good at being able to think and predict and talk about with one another in really insightful ways, we can really talk about our emotions. And let me just talk to you at depth about what happened yesterday when we met, and when you said this and how I was feeling. And then I saw this on your face, and I think maybe you were feeling that. And I wonder if that's because with your father, and we could do all that. That would be much more of an emotional intelligence, right? But that can also be a barrier to what I think we're talking about when we say emotional maturity, which is what is our personal ability as an individual to be able to be with our emotional
Yeah.
experience. That's what it is. It's about being, it's about embodying, it's about, I think of it really as ego maturity. Like we are talking about kind of the structure, again, this is Freudian, but like the structural integrity of the ego in your adult state, which is why this is about maturity. This is not something a child is meant to have, right? Maturity. The structural state of your ego to be able to hold and experience deeply emotional states, right? And there's a lot of different capacities that are built into that I think are necessary for us to say that someone, like to account for someone's level of maturity. And these are all the things that I think get lost in conversations around emotional intelligence. So there is
Hmm.
how able are you as an individual to stop and hold and notice the intensity of the emotional experience that's happening. So when you talk about rage, rage is a great one. How much can you really, without doing anything, no acting out, no speaking to anyone about it, but just notice inside you exactly where those rage pathways are, how intensely and viscerally you can feel them, the heat that's generated by them, right? You might even go so far as to notice the actual impulse, what they want to do, all these things. Just the holding of it and experiencing deeply, not just going, oh, I had a flutter in my chest, I got nervous, that means I'm really angry at you. And so now we're going to talk about my anger. And as I talk about my anger in really factual and insightful ways, and I can draw all these links about how that might relate to our broader relationship, actually what happens is my connection to the body sense of it diminishes. Because now I've brought my frontal lobe online.
Go up here.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that actually helps to downregulate the feeling in the body. I do, just as a quick aside, I want to state that there are times to do that. I'm not implying that that we should be doing this all the time, but this to me is part of the distinction of what we mean. Are you capable of, in certain moments when you choose to be able to go in and actually feel it all? Are you the other component here with maturity, I think, is the complexity piece. So it's also our capacity to be with not just one but multiple things at once. I know I can feel and be in the presence in my body of how much I both love you right now and am enraged at you right now. I can have them both. I can feel both at once. So and being with ambivalence, being with complexity of those feelings, because often what happens is we learn we can't tolerate that, so we have to split to one or the other, right? And you can notice that even when people are talking sometimes about emotions, the needing to turn someone into a bad guy or anyway.
Hmm.
So there's that. There's also our ability to reality test. So there's this kind of emotional maturity involves how much space do I have in my body to fully feel not just one but several feelings that might be conflictual at once, to not have to do anything at all with my actions as a result. To reality test then though, to notice this that I'm experiencing in my body, how much of that is actually in relation to the reality of the situation that I'm finding myself in, how much might be historical, how much might be, so there's that component too that's about maturity. And the self-reflecting, how much of this is also what role have I played here? So those are kind of more up at that level, I think, the kind of like thinking about level. But the bit in our body, I just get the sense that whenever I bring that up in these sorts of conversations online, that it's kind of just like yeah, like you feel it in your body, yeah. And but like that is actually not easy to do. And
Hmm.
I don't meet many people that are able to just do that without really, really working on it as an adult. And that is not meditation, like that is not trying to calm
Hmm.
and quiet. Um,
Hmm.
it's because the reason is if we can't do that, the default is like you were talking about this kid in the family system who thinks he's got agency, but he's actually not the center, and he's actually being pulled around by all these other forces in the family unit. We're being pulled around by all these other forces in our unconscious and in our psyche, and often those of the person we're relating with, if we're not able to fully feel our emotions, because they are operating underground to keep us away from feeling our emotions, because we learned we couldn't tolerate it. So they pull us away from them. That's the act. Does that make sense? That's the motivation often. That's the motivation to go, I'm not talking to that person anymore, right? I'm ending this conversation. I'm hanging up, I don't know, the phone call or whatever. It's generally not that we've got in touch with the deepest feeling inside us and we're really feeling it and we're reflecting on it. It's generally just, I don't like this feeling that's emerging. And when that happens, I come up with a really good story about,
Mm,
I don't deserve to feel this way with this person. And then I remember all the
mhm,
times that they've mistreated me, and I'm getting out of this now, and I hang up.
mm.
Um,
Yeah.
so to me,
Eh,
maturity is kind of more about courage. It's like,
Yep.
it's a
Mhm.
courageous act. It's a courage to be with that which is intense. It's to do more with the soul, if we put it in those terms. Um, Intelligence, if we think Jungian is kind of a bit more like, can operate like as part of the persona. Look at me, I can be very emotionally intelligent. This is more about kind of getting into the full depths of who we are inside. That's what maturity is to me. And
Yeah.
that actually means that you're less likely to make some kind of like very quick and fatal errors in relationships. That can go either way. There could be fatal errors that open you up to too much abuse for too long, or they could be fatal
Mm,
errors that lead you to cutting people off and cutting off possibility way too soon. Um,
hmm. Yeah.
is that helpful?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Very helpful. And I think anger here is really like a great one to zero in on to notice the distinction between emotional intelligence and emotional maturity. And I think
And sexual feelings.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And yeah, Freud's gonna love this one from the grave. Everything's coming back to sex. Um,
Well, we were saying, we should say quickly, Michael, we were saying before this conversation that there's too much emphasis on Lacan in these circles. Like, where is Freud and
yes,
Jung? Where are they?
prayers,
Bring them
Freud.
back
I
in.
know, I know, I know. We're singing their praises.
That's right.
Yeah, like, and I was thinking as you were talking, specifically the last thing you were mentioning about, I experience anger that leads me to kind of characterize someone as a boogeyman or as a bad guy. I
Yeah.
distance themselves. When I see that happen, and when I do it myself, we bullshit ourselves because
Yeah.
we think that we're actually in touch with the anger, and
Yeah.
that's like, because yeah, when I was a kid, I had to suppress that. I had to continue to appease. I had to be the codependent person. And now I'm standing up for myself and I'm owning my feelings and I'm giving you the Heisman. I'm standing up for myself.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's versions of that, if people are in genuinely abusive
Yes.
relationships, that is absolutely
Obviously. Yes.
necessary. But on the other side of like there's this psychotherapist I love on YouTube, and I'd be curious to get your thoughts, who says anger is a secondary emotion.
Mm. Yeah.
And what he means by that is that anger is never the thing at the bottom.
Yeah.
Anger is usually above, I think he said, sadness, shame, um,
When you get hurt.
rejection, hurt. Um, and
Yeah.
and so the anger is an interesting one because if you kind of over-index the expression of anger or or too quickly launch into action in response to anger, you kind of you subvert
Yeah.
the shame and the sadness and the hurt. Like you don't actually get to feel that
Yep.
because you push someone away and then you just don't want to think about them anymore. So you just compartmentalize them out of your mind and you don't really grieve.
Mm.
And it seems silly. It's like, well, don't we only grieve people that we love? You know, shouldn't we only grieve? Shouldn't we only be sad for the relationships that really meant something to us that we leave, like not the ones where, you know, someone
Possibility.
was an asshole to us.
Yeah.
Um, but if you don't do that, that pattern will show up all over the place.
Yeah.
I've had I've seen that happen in my life.
Yeah.
And so there's there yeah, it's so
Yeah.
true that that real experience of rage and to not critically to not be scared of it.
Yes.
Um
That's the
to
hardest
be
part.
able to have it to be able to have that in the presence of the one you love
Yes.
and to not be because I think what takes people out of that takes people out of that experience and into their head with people that they love is they fear if I express this, this person will leave,
Yeah, the
right?
consequences
Like
are huge. Yeah.
that's just the feel. Like it's just the human feeling. And so
Yes.
to be resourced enough within yourself, and maybe this is where something like faith comes in,
Mhm.
which seems like it has to originate from the body as well. Like those deeper resources of faith to believe that I can have an experience of a violent, potentially violent emotion.
Yeah, and anger usually is,
And
right? Anger is not usually about
yes,
just, shaking your finger at someone. Yeah, yeah,
no, yeah, yeah, it could, yeah.
yeah.
Um, but you know, and and maybe bringing this back to the sexual feeling, like
Yes.
for
Same.
it to have its climax,
Yeah.
and then for it to release into usually a more tender emotion of sadness, shame,
Yes.
hurt,
Love.
something like that.
Love is usually
And
there. Doesn't matter who it is usually
that
love.
then, yes, yes. And that then, yeah, it's usually always a disappointment over
Mhm.
a lack of attunement or a lack of love.
And a
And you
shared human
precise
experience, a shared human experience of the
mhm,
fact that we're different and we're distant and we can't possibly ever be complete for each other. Like I think that
yeah.
too. Yeah.
And if that core can be expressed of what I really want,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
below the he said, she said, he did this, she did this, like below that layer is I love you
Yes.
and I feel 10,000 miles apart from you
Yes.
and
Yes.
I want to be closer.
Yes.
That then pulls
Yeah.
people together and stimulates
Yes.
intimacy.
Yes.
And that whole process is missed if you don't
If you
have
don't
that
go through that.
experience.
Yeah, if you just go, right, let's
Yeah.
have sex. You know,
Right. Yeah,
but that,
makeup
that is,
like
the parallel is
the
there.
makeup sex, right?
Makeup
Is
sex.
like the trope. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. But that is like an example of it. It relates to the sexual feelings too, because it's the same thing. It's like this is the bedrock within. This is the kind of relationship within. Experiencing and acting on sexual feelings is just grounded in such a more complex, deeper kind of intimacy already as the starting point than is, the I don't have to be vulnerable with you at all, but for, we might get naked. Like, that's it. But that again is like a very cheap kind of vulnerability. There's so much more vulnerability because that's what you're talking about. You were talking there about an example where we are fearful to show people we love or relationships we want to keep. We are fearful to show them things about us that we think they might not particularly like. It might not please them. And one of those might be to say that, oh, I was really hurt by you. I'm really angry about something. Because they might not like it. And then they might leave me, right? They could do all sorts of other things too, but they might leave me if we just put it in simple terms. Um, and again, this is where the maturity component comes in because there's two components to that. First, if I'm getting close to someone, um, I want them to always have the choice to know who it is that they're getting close to and make a decision that they don't want to get any closer or they want to not know me anymore or whatever, right? And actually, the best way I can honor their agency and determination in that is to be as honest as I can about who I am. And that includes, when you do these sorts of things, that creates lots of anger in me. Like it is part of who I am and my experience. Otherwise, I am hiding who I really am. I'm curating an experience, a performance of Aspasia that is going to be pleasing to this person because I want them to hang around. That diminishes their agency, like that doesn't honor them and their ability to really know who they're with. And also, it keeps me feeling less vulnerable because you can get really good at that, especially if you are like an intuitive kind of person and you have been focused on others, you can know what kinds of things a person's going to like about you or not like about you. Um, so don't, if you don't, if you don't share with someone the things that you have a pretty good idea they're not going to be happy about, they might not like about you, then you are flattening, you are avoiding the possibility of a kind of depth that you could be cultivating together, um, because you don't actually know how it's going to go. You are also denying them the ability to make, again, an informed choice about actually wanting to continue to be with you or whatever it is, be your friend or whatever. Um, and you are, is a third one that I forgot. Like you are also not building your own ability to be more and more vulnerable. It
Mm-hmm.
is, it's a vulnerable act. And this is why I was talking about emotional maturity is related to courage for me. Like it's courageous. It is, you don't start to share these things in these sorts of close relationships because you know it's going to go well. You share them with the complete terror that you have no idea where it's going to where it's going to go. But actually, if that's the honesty of what's happening for me right now, and I've taken time to check in with it and all these things, right? This is not about weaponizing it, right? And I'm able to talk now to this person about it in a way that is an attempt to connect and work through it. It's not an attempt to make them feel that they've, done something bad to me. Then that's all I can do. That's my part in the relationship, and the rest is up to them. And it's this faith thing. And some people might not like that about you, and they might decide they don't want anything to do with you again. That's true. That's true, and we can't control that. But again, this goes back to love ultimately not being about trying to control another person. It's an honoring. Um, the people we love can choose to leave us and hurt us whenever they want. That's just how it is. Um, and all we can do is sort of show up and do our part as best we can. So um, I think that's important. I also wanted to link to, you were saying something there about anger and sort of this idea of like standing up for myself. And often I think like you're right, what happens is we get confused. We start to feel the anger in our body, and we think, I've spent my whole life not standing up for myself. I'm going to like do it now by leaving this room or saying, I'm not talking to you anymore or whatever it is. I think, again, if we think about this shift from something that might be more like an emotional intelligence to a maturity, it may be that there's a way that we are able to develop these capacities where we can stand up for ourselves internally by doing nothing different externally whatsoever. Like just feeling the feeling inside and continuing to
Mm-hmm.
stand and be there and not really do much, not leave the room. Again, there are situations where you need to leave the room, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Is that is still a standing up for yourself. You are not starting to say things you don't believe in, right? You just stay there and you hold your
Yeah.
position, and you stay there with the willingness to continue the exploration together if they want, but you're not going to bend to their will, or right? You're only going to be honest about what's happening for you, but you don't leave. That is still a standing up for yourself. The leaving, the departing, the hanging up on people. I mean, we all do it. I do it. People do it. I'm not trying to pretend that they don't. But all of that is like really what we would call technically an acting out. It's like an anxious discharge. Like you said, oh my
Mm-hmm.
God, this feeling is freaking me out. Like I don't do well with this feeling. I'm getting out of here. I'm standing up for myself. I'm not going to tolerate being around someone who activates this feeling inside me. Right? That's really what it is. I don't want to be around someone who's making me have this intense internal experience. Right? I'm worth more than that, so I'm going to get out of the situation. Um, does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I appreciate that. And I
Again, it's nuanced, so I don't want to say it's every situation, but you know what I mean.
yeah. But there is a skillfulness in just being able to, I mean, literally just standing up for yourself and not feeling like you have to, play the kind of like kind of conversational. war of
Yeah.
going back and forth. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that's where the discernment comes in of like, is this a situation where I feel like the other person is also doing that, either not trying to flee or not trying to
Yeah.
fight in this activated sense, that it would be worth it to talk through this.
Yeah.
Um,
Do I trust that they're
but
being me in that
yeah,
scenario?
yeah.
Yeah.
But like, even if that's the case, there's a lot of like personal, I think, power and resourcing that can come from just fully feeling and embodying
Yeah.
energy that feels really overwhelming and feels like this, feels like you're being tumbled by
Yeah.
some big wave. Um,
Yes.
and
Yes.
yeah, and then on the other side of that, then being able to talk from that place. I'm also noticing how, like you could still fall into the emotional intelligence thing of speaking about the anger after you've had
Yeah.
maybe after the experience, after you've had it. But if you've really had it, and importantly too, like having it in the presence of the person who's maybe making you feel that way, as opposed to,
Yeah.
I'm going to take a hike, I'm going to meditate about it on my own, where it's a lot easier
Yeah.
to sit with it than to look the person in the eye,
Yes.
and
Yes.
to have it in their presence.
Yes. And this is graded, right? Like, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that approach that you just described there at the end.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
fine as you're learning it, right? And there will always be the kinds of conversations, I think, no matter how good we get at it, there will be the kinds of conversations where it's so intense and you might need to take a minute. But it's different to say to someone, you know, I love you, but this is just really intense for me right now. I just need a minute, right? And we need to talk about this, but I need a minute. And to like leave the room or to go, like whatever it is, and to take some time and then to come back and talk about it again. That's very different from just the being flung around by the rising intensity of visceral feeling in your body and that sense of, oh, this is awful. I hate this. I don't like this feeling. This is freaking me out. I got to get out of here. Like that is kind of the anxiety. And then we can often do that in a storming out kind of way, or I'm not taking this anymore, or um, when really part of what we're fleeing is the intensity of the emotional experience. I think part of what comes from that maturity stuff, though, that whole idea around building our capacity to be more fully in our body with a feeling, feel it all, understand its intensity, understand we can hold it, understand we can have that while also remembering this is my friend so and so, and I actually really love them, and feeling the love for them, having them both there at the same time. When you're able to do all of that, there is a kind of wisdom that naturally flows from it sometimes, if you don't go looking for it, that is to do with um, understanding, oh, like actually, now that I really feel this anger and I realize like what it kind of wants to do, and I'm just like imagining almost the things that would come out of my mouth if I was really having this anger. I realize that I'm not even talking to this person. I'm talking to my sister when I was 5 years old. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's, when I say wisdom, there is a way that you can
Or
kind of,
I'm talking to this person 5 years ago.
yes, yes. I'm talking to this person
Mm.
about that thing they did to me 5 years ago that I told myself I let go of, but I never actually did, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and you go, oh, and then this sort of, but it happens naturally, it's like, oh, and that hurt me so much because that taught me that people reject me if I reveal vulnerable stuff about myself. And now this person made this small comment, and I can see how something in me interpreted it as, oh, it's that again. This is one of those people that's going to humiliate me for revealing something about myself. And that's why I had this massive reaction, right? So there's a portion here that is sure to do with this person. I want them to know that I don't like it. I don't like the experience of someone singling out something I do as strange or something. But there's also this whole other, now I understand why it was so intense, because I felt like I was fighting all those fights I could never fight when I was a child, when everyone used to pigeonhole me and tell me, I don't know, you're strange when you do that or whatever. And I could never fight back. I was never allowed to have my anger about it. I had to just agree with them. Right, so there's a way that you come to understand your relational history that can help to demystify why is it that I am so enraged in this moment, right? Like, is it really, that's what I mean by reality testing. Is it all about this person in this particular moment, or is there other stuff that's pulling up too? And when you can do that, again, if we use just like a long-term committed romantic relationship as an example, when you can do that together as a couple and you can just go back and say, on reflection about that disagreement we had, I realized like when you said this thing, that tripped this whole wire for me inside. Like, and you can actually get to know each other more deeply. It's a really
Hmm.
beautiful, intimate
Hmm.
thing. And then it's
Hmm.
the doorway to talk about for the other person, oh wow, now I understand better why it is in all these other situations that we've had. You've done all these things. I didn't understand what is going on. And
Yeah.
also I can care for you better now because I know that about you. Doesn't mean they're never gonna, do the things, but they can understand it from a wiser, deeper place as well. It really builds relational depth when you can do that. So there's lots of things that flow from the emotional wisdom piece. It's not just the being able to be with the full intensity of the emotion and remain with the person in the one-on-one. It's also what you get to understand more deeply about yourself, and then the possibilities that opens up, because now I can actually look at my partner when he's doing that thing he does that everything inside me reads as total rejection. He's totally rejecting you. And I'm like, yeah, it's not total rejection, right? I can also remember, oh, he's the man I love. And like you can stay in touch with the loving feelings. And you can be aware that this is pulling on this whole history I have with this topic. And it's a much more, you can hear, it's a much more complex, nuanced thing. It's all happening inside. No one knows that's happening inside me. It's just all happening inside. And I just remain in that moment. I don't act out to discharge anxiety. I don't go into weepy self-attack because that's the only thing that I know is going to make someone come and rescue me from this moment. I don't start listing all the ways that this person is terrible for me and I should have seen it for years and that's it. We're over all these things. I don't take off and slam doors um, but I can still make a stand for myself. I can still own the portion that's like, yes, it tripped all these wires and it did all this stuff, but also it really isn't okay when you speak to me that way. I'm actually not okay with that. So we need to face that together. We need to so you still make a stand. There's still strength in your position. You don't lie. You don't conceal, right? But the making a stand is the making a stand with what you're asking for and what you're tolerating, not always in your body, but just in the kind of, does that make sense? In the conversational sense.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and it's difficult. Anger is a difficult one because the other thing that happens with anger is it's 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 an aggressive impulse that often, like I said, when we really look at it, is we were terrified of it when we were really young. So we've never really fully felt it inside us. And so everything in us is designed to make us run every time we're in a conflict where it starts to rise up in our body and we start to feel it. I actually think that for many people, the real fear there, if you really look at it, is not that if I really talk about it, the person will leave me. It's that if this continues, this back and forth, I don't know how far this feeling goes, and I might hurt someone. Like I don't trust this feeling in my body. I actually think it might reach out and do something to someone who I love, and that would just be the worst catastrophe in the world. I'm not going near that, so I'm getting the hell out of this room. Like sometimes it's that. I'm not saying that's happening consciously, but it's our own fear of being able to hold an impulse inside. I think that can also lead to that, which links to childhood. Um, and I do think that actually relates to the sexual feelings too, because I think for some people that might be for some that might be too why they find it empowering to just be free and easy with acting out their sexual feelings whenever
Hmm.
they have them, because then they don't have to confront what it's like to just hold them inside and remain with a person, right? While noticing
Yeah.
part of my experience with this person is that I get sexual feelings. Like I don't have to do anything with them, right? And also I can find ways to sublimate them into creativity and other ways of being creative with this person in this relationship that don't involve having sex. We move to acting out some emotions way too quickly, and we move to chopping other ones off at the knees way too quickly. And we go up here to craft really beautiful, lovely stories about all of that and about how it's in the service of growing and maturity. But we can't forget our body, and we can't ignore our emotional circuitry, and we do have to contend with it, and we have to contend with what it feels like when it is intensely activated with another person who we also care about, and we can do that work together. And we have to be able to contend with that if we want to deepen our relationships. Otherwise, there will only ever be a certain level, and we might be able to sit together and talk really beautifully and eloquently about a whole lot of emotionally intelligent stuff, but we're not deepening our capacity to actually, I think actually at the heart of it, it's deepening our capacity for intimacy. It's more and more intimate the more that you can do that with someone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking too that I do unfortunately have to take
No, no,
care of
that's
my
okay.
bio needs here
Yeah,
soon.
no, that's
So
fine.
yeah, but kind of bringing it to a close, I was thinking also, how much we're able to deepen in intimacy without words. Um, like I just went dancing with my girlfriend yesterday, swing dancing
Oh,
in the
fun.
city, and it was the first time we had danced together. 'Cause we've only been together a few months. And she had this long background doing Irish dancing as a kid, and so she's this just very spirited dancer. And there's so much in dancing that
Yeah.
mirrors like intimacy in other ways. Like you are,
Yeah.
especially if you're improving, it's like one person's leading, and so that comes with a certain level of like kind of that masculine thing of like,
Yeah.
where are we going, what are we doing?
Yeah.
One person's following, you're both resonating with each other, trying to be in sync with each other, but also trying to express and create something together. And
Very playful. Yeah.
you yeah, yeah. And like like after that experience, like I felt I definitely felt a deeper connection
Yeah.
with her. And I felt a deeper connection with myself. Like I had to,
Yeah.
like I had to contend with my own, we're doing with other people. Like I had to contend with, self-consciousness, like just
Yeah.
the thoughts of, how do I look, whatever.
But the
What does she
container of
think
the
of what I'm
relationship.
doing?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Right, right, yeah, yeah. But it's and so I think
Oh,
that's a great thing for people to hold as like,
yeah.
because I think emotional intelligence is a very verbal like
It is.
capacity, right? Whereas emotional maturity, the speech act is obviously incredibly central to this, but it can be experienced and embodied, like you said, just merely standing or sitting, whatever, and just having the feeling without necessarily saying something.
Yeah.
And if you're really close with someone, they can feel when, in the absence of words, if you're really having the feeling,
Yeah.
or if internally you're running away, or internally you're taking out the boxing gloves, right? Um,
Yes.
and that, yeah, like that is for me, it's a helpful thing to remind myself of because I am a highly verbal person.
Yeah.
And so often I can use that as an escape. I can use that as a
It titrates.
yeah, and to confront my fear of silence constantly is
Silence is scary.
has been very fruitful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. There's something to be said too for just like holding eye contact with a person, right? Someone you care about, you're trying to develop intimacy. Dancing's another one. I mean, that's just so beautiful. Like the way you were describing how spirited she was. I got the sense it's almost like it matched what it is that you like about her as a like in all the
Mhm.
other like she did this kind of, and you wouldn't have got to see that but for the dancing. Like there's a real
Right.
vulnerability from being with one another in non-verbal ways. And I think there's a lot of emphasis on conversations with partners these days, and that matters. Um, but I almost see all of that, like I see conversations as, I think it's Daniel that talks about it, like the clearing function. It's like something you do, but
Mm,
you're ultimately doing it in the service of kind of making a space for those
yes.
emotional moments, like that emotional resonance together. And that is
Yeah.
wordless. You don't,
Yeah.
yeah, you don't, it's not the other way around. That's what I'm trying to say. And
Yeah.
that is the depth of intimacy that you're starting to develop, right? That's very different
Mhm.
to, yeah, just always talking about things that are,
Yeah.
with words. And words matter, but words fail. Words are only so good. And there's nothing like just being with someone you love and just being with them and being silent with them and feeling the vulnerability of that, and the terror of that can come, and their shared willingness to enter into that with you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very creative.
And
It was so nice to
yeah,
speak with you. I always love
it
speaking
was
with
great.
you.
It was great to speak with you.
Oh,
I always enjoy our conversations. And yeah, you mentioned in the beginning doing a series. I love the idea of that.
should we do it?
Um,
Let's do it.
I think so. We
Yeah,
there it is. We've decided.
that's
It's spoken into the Zoomverse.
what I really appreciate about you, Michael, is you have a real vulnerability about the way that you talk about these things and share, and I really see it in you, and I think it's an incredible thing. Very
Thank you.
brave,
Thank
and
you.
I think you have a lot of that emotional wisdom already in that sense, that maturity, and your courage
Mm.
to face these things and to grow. So it's been lovely.
Oh,
Thank you
thank
so
you.
much.
That's
Yeah.
very touching. I feel the exact same about you, and I feel like I stand on the shoulder of giants of people in my life who have taught. I certainly didn't get that taught as a kid. So,
I
and
think that's
you're
I
definitely
think
in
that's what we
in
probably
that.
all have in common, is that we probably, most of
Yeah.
us didn't get that as kids, and so we're here doing it now together.
Yeah.
Yeah.